Hello, BookTube. One of the things I quasi-promised myself I would do on my channel in 2023, if I had a channel in 2023, was a library tour. Soup to nuts, A to Z, a complete library tour. I haven't done one of those in a while on this channel, and the earlier ones that I've done, I think I've done two, separated by years each, and they are remarkably valuable records for me. Visual records for me of what I have at that moment. I put myself in this mind frame at the end of 2022 by finally conducting an inventory of my books, which came to around 5,000 print and paper books and around 10,000 ebooks, thereabouts. I have the exact numbers, believe it or not. I counted every single book. I used little post-it notes for each individual bookcase, and then used a calculator on the iPad to tally those all up at the end. Part of the reason that I did that is because I still want to decrease the size of my library enormously. My e-library is fine, but 5,000 books is too much for one person to have, I think. And that put me in the mind to do another library tour. So that's what I'm gonna start today. I don't know if I will continue. I don't know if I will actually stick it out to do every single print book here all the way to the end. I'd like to think that I would. It would be a valuable record for me to keep, and it might be of interest to you, especially new people who didn't see the first two library tours. So we're going to start. We'll start here, and I'm going to start in the little book room. I'm going to go north to south just in a circle in the little book room, and then we'll move on to the rest of Hyde Cottage. And we'll start this little shelf here with where the whole thing should stop. we'll start with where the whole of this, almost all of this library, to all but 100 books, should stop, with these e-readers. Just by chance, my e-readers are sitting up here. Not all of them, because these are the ones I'm not currently using. I have a bunch of e-readers. And I've learned to just let it go by mood in terms of which device I'm using. And lately, all of that, the mood has driven all of that reading to my iPad mini. I have two iPad minis. One is a first generation that is kind of slow, but you can still read on it. It's got 1,500 books on it. You can still read on it perfectly fine. And the other is an iPad mini 4. That's nice and fast and smooth. It's nothing compared to what I've heard the miracle of the iPad mini 6 is, but I think the iPad mini is a miraculous device anyway. Just utterly incredible. I don't know that I need more operating systems or tech than I have on the iPad mini 4. If I can still use the iPad mini 1 for everything that I need it to do, then I don't think I need in 2023 to invest in the iPad mini 6. I think what I probably need to do if I'm going to make an iPad mini purchase in 2023 would be to keep my eyes open for a nice cheap iPad mini 4 with a lot more storage than the model that I got, so I can just fill it with stuff. But we'll take a look at these. This is the Kindle Oasis. As far as e-readers go, this is the Kindle Oasis. This has thousands of books on it. It's got the uneven bezel there, a grip for the hand, with a large bezel on the side and a gyroscope so that the text will turn either way, no matter what you're looking at. It's Amazon's high-end Kindle. I think all three of these are Kindles. That's their high-end Kindle, at least for now. I've heard rumors that they're going to discontinue the Kindle Oasis. I think it's a beautiful machine, just wonderful, and an incredibly big, bright screen. Then we have probably the e-reader, the one that if you just got into e-reading, or if you look at market shares, I'm sure that this is the most popular e-reader in the world. This is the Kindle Paperwhite, which is rubber instead of metal. It doesn't have physical page turn buttons the way the Kindle Oasis does. It's just a flat screen. It's not recessed in any way. It has the very annoying position of the power button right on the bottom where you rest it in your hand, but you get used to that. And it's got responsive light. It's extremely durable. It's always there. I had the Kindle Paperwhite and the Kindle Oasis. I bounced back and forth between them, used them a lot. But then when Amazon came out, when they rolled out their new basic Kindle, so not a Paperwhite, not a new edition of the Paperwhite, and certainly not an Oasis, but upgraded from both of them. I couldn't resist. It was $100 that I didn't need to spend. But I was curious. All the reviews that I'd seen online made it look as if this thing was incredibly sharp and fast, and it is. It is. I got the denim blue, and as you can see, this does have a recess. This does have raised bezels. Same annoying position of the power button at the bottom there, but again, you get used to it. And this thing is so feather light, it's lighter than the Kindle Paperwhite, that you're not really in any danger of turning the power on or off when you're resting it in your hand. And it's incredibly sharp and fast. It's the entry-level Kindle, but it's an incredibly great device for e-reading. And I'm sure that this has been out for, a couple of months now? I'm sure that there's a thriving secondhand market. I'm sure that you could get a sealed-in box used Kindle Basic, I think it came in black or denim blue, on eBay or the Amazon Marketplace for half of that. I'm sure that you could get one for really cheap. I just was really curious. I should never do that. I should never ever do that. I do not need any tech so bad that I should spend that kind of money for something brand new. I should never do that. But I did this one time. Then we'll do a few more here until we get to the first shelf, because I have a shelf, but I have books stacked on top, and I don't want any of these videos to be extra long. This first one is a box set. It really doesn't need to be where it is. This is Overlook, years and years ago, did Woodhouse. They did a box set of Jeeves and Wooster, and they did a box set of golf stories too, I think. I had both of them at one point, but not all of Woodhouse is as revisitable for me as some of Woodhouse. Jeeves and Wooster I can revisit forever, although in honesty, I don't want to be a broken record here, but in honesty, I do revisit Woodhouse, but I revisit Woodhouse on a Kindle. I don't revisit Woodhouse. I don't think I've pulled one of those books out of that box since I originally got it 10 years ago. Whatever that says. One thing that it certainly says is another aspect of why I like doing on-camera library tours, which is they're a great way of winnowing books from your library. Holding this thing, I realize that I don't use it. I am not going to use it. So why do I have it? I do not have an answer to that question. If you were to say to me, if I were to think one day, if I were to come across in a novel or whatever, something that reminded me of a Jeeves and Wooster story or anything by Woodhouse, and I thought, gee, it'd be great to revisit, Blanding's Castle or something like that, I would go straight to an e-reader. I have all of Woodhouse on every one of these e-readers. I would go straight to an e-reader. I would not go to a book, much less a book in a box, a hardcover in a box that I could hurt or damage. Anyway, then this next one's an old vintage paperback. This is Making Hay by Verlyn Klinkerborg, who grew up on a farm in Iowa and then went away to school to the big city, got degrees, and then came back and still had relatives in Iowa and Minnesota and still working on farms. So the author went and talked to them, wrote a little memoir about it. I found this up in Vermont in 2019. I'd read it when it first came out. When was that? As long as we're making a record. Yeah, 1986. I read it when it first came out and really, really liked it. So and then, I didn't have a copy. So decades and decades passed, and then we were book hunting up in Vermont, and I saw a copy and grabbed it. Then we have another new book. This is from 2022, I believe. 2021. This is by Chloe Shaw, and this is What is a Dog? This is her meditation of what is a dog, with a clipping inside it. My freelancer Carly Jensen reviewed it for Big Canoe News in Northern Georgia. It's the kind of book that I always joke that no one should be able to write this kind of book other than me, but it's more a meditation from the outside rather than trying to tell you what dogs are thinking. There isn't a book written that can tell you what dogs are thinking. But this is more a meditation from the outside, the author's sort of chronicle of their life in dogs. Okay, then another new release. By new release, I don't mean that it just came out. I mean, It's not a secondhand book. I got it from the publisher. This in 2007. This is Jeff Wisner's book, Thoreau's Animals, with illustrations by Debbie Cotter Kaspari, and they're very good illustrations. And there are spot illustrations all throughout. This goes through Thoreau's journals and just reprints the stuff where he is observing animals. There was also one of these for Thoreau's Wildflowers that I didn't keep, but I kept the animal one because it's a great insight into Thoreau. To have all of those, I mean, I've read Thoreau, everything by Thoreau many, many times, but having someone lovingly go through and find mentions under a heading and pull those all together, that's not only valuable, but interesting. Really, really interesting what lines you're gonna draw. Okay, then we have Penguin trade paperback. I found this just last year, I think at the Brattle bookshop here in Boston. I had a hardcover of this forever and ever, and then I found the lovely trade paperback and thought, well, why? Why do you have the hardcover if you've got the trade paperback? So I swapped them out. The trade paperback is less. It's more durable. It's less of a bother on the shelf. This is Nick Pionson's book, Spying on Whales. And in addition to all of that, this is also prettier than the hardcover. So I grabbed it and swapped it out. I didn't work out the ergonomics of where to put things here, but we don't have that much further to go. Here's an older book. This is Edith Hamilton. Some of you will know Edith Hamilton from her book Mythology that sold a bucket load of copies. She wrote a lot of books. I am a little bit odd in that I love them all. I think they're all fantastic. And this is her book, Witness to the Truth, Christ and His Interpreters, which is, let me see here. Let's see the table of contents. We have, well, it's mostly about the Gospels and St. Paul. And it's not cutting edge at all. Obviously, this came out 100 years ago, almost. When did this come out? 1948. So it's not cutting edge. It wasn't cutting edge when it did come out. It's just a kind of an extremely well-read classicist reflections on the New Testament. I just love the way Edith Hamilton writes. That's all. Then we have reference work. I love this. I go back to it a lot. I found a hardcover copy in a plastic library covering, so I grabbed it. This is edited by the great Otto Penzler. This is The Great Detectives. And the subtitle there is A Host of the World's Most Celebrated Sleuths Are Unmasked by Their Authors, where the writers write about their sleuths. Very interesting stuff. Some of which, as far as I know, has never been reprinted elsewhere. Or some of it is reprinted in the collected works of some of these people whose collected works have gone out of print for 100 years. So it's much the same thing. I go back to it and lovingly look at it a lot. In March, Mystery Madness, a big booktube event dedicated to murder mysteries. I've often said there ought to be more than one murder mystery event on the booktube landscape. Certainly nothing as old or as big as March Mystery Madness. I know there are others. There are things devoted to cozy mysteries and whatnot. But I read mysteries all year long anyway, so I go back to this a lot. It shouldn't be where it is. There's a collection of murder mystery related stuff. It should be there, but it'll do for now. It'll do for now. Then we have a battered old trade paperback of a textbook, A History of the Modern World by Palmer and Colton. I found this for free, and I was careful when I looked through it. You have to be careful with this particular trade paperback because it was used in schools a lot, and I don't want my trade paperback to have obnoxious neon highlighting. This one does not. And although it was used as a textbook, it is amazingly good reading. I don't see it that often used, so when I do, I grab it. Then we have another new book. This is a reprint. From 2018, this is Rachel Carson's book, The Sea Around Us. I think this was a lovely, lovely trade paperback. I love Rachel Carson. I think she's fantastic. I think this was sort of designed by Oxford to come out around the same time as Rachel Carson got a Library of America volume. I could have the timing wrong on that, but I have the Library of America volumes, and I love this volume. I love it separately. Although I have them all as ebooks. I don't think I would ever go back to them. Otherwise, I don't think I would ever go back to that trade paperback. Whereas something like this, I don't know that you'd find an ebook of this. And so, like I say, if I were to radically change this thing so that the first three things we saw, those e-readers, were the only things, if I kept 100, 200 books, this would be the kind of thing that I would keep. This is by Ernest Harold Baines, and it's called The Sprite. It's an old book, an old photo book from, when did you come out? 100 years ago, I'm sure. 1934. Full of black and white photos of a wild fox that this author briefly befriends. It does not domesticate. It's the exact same book as Fox and I. It's the exact same book as that. It's just 100 years earlier. These things are nature memoirs like that, where someone befriends or adopts or temporarily fosters a wild animal of some kind, whether it's a snail or a fox or a marten or a buffalo. They are recurring things. Every once in a while, someone will have an extraordinary circumstance. I don't know of more than one book on a family that took an American bison into their home. I don't know of more than one book like Born Free that is about a lion, because those entail a huge amount of danger. And most of the people in the United States, anyway, who have lions and tigers on their property as prisoners very much don't want to admit that fact in a book. They very much don't want to, because they're almost certainly in violation of a whole bunch of national and international laws. I often stew about that, but then I remember that almost fully 100% of those people end up dead by those animals. They make a mistake. The animals are never, the animals themselves, the lions and the tigers, the bears and the panthers or the alligators or whatever, they're watchful all the time. They hate their captivity, and they especially incandescently hate their captors. So they're watching all the time. Whereas a human being gets complacent. Leaves a door unlatched for just a fraction of a second, gets a little too close to a bar. That's all it takes. These stories happen all the time of people being mauled and ripped to pieces by the animals they've enslaved. Well, that took a dark turn. I meant to say that The Sprite probably does not exist as an ebook. We have another nature book here. This is an advanced copy from 2012, so before we were talking to each other. This is by Rick Bass, and it is The Black Rhinos of Namibia. Beautifully, beautifully written. Not the only Rick Bass in this room. I think he's a terrific, terrific writer. This one he goes far afield. Talks about, an extremely endangered, basically extinct, gigantic native fauna. Describes the landscape, the animals, amazingly well. It's just a totally immersive book. Then we have Alexander Wolcott, a wit from the New Yorker Roundtable. But, he wrote a few books. I really like his style. And I have his two books. He was the town crier. He was a kind of a buffoonish public intellectual 100 years ago. And he wrote a couple of books that I really like that were made into little pocket paperbacks that are pretty durable. My two pocket paperbacks are still up and running. Those pocket paperbacks, the ones I'm talking about, are really rereadable despite their age. But I want them in hardcovers. They aren't going to last forever, and I go back to these things. This is only one of them. I found a copy of While Rome Burns. There's a Gluyas Williams caricature of Wolcott, and these are just occasional essays that he wrote there. I just think they're enjoyable, that's all. But there's one other. There's While Rome Burns, but there's one other that, actually, I'd take any of him that I could find in hardcover. Then we have an anthology. This is something I go back to a lot. I don't think this could ever be in an ebook. This is a New England Reader. Excerpts from New England writing all the way from the Puritans to the early 20th century, edited by Van Wyck Brooks, who was a Mr. New England, a sort of New England poobah at the time. This has lots and lots of good stuff in it. He has an introduction here, and his presence is very much there in the selections. So it's a really good anthology. I have a couple of anthologies left to go here. We don't have much longer. We'll finish this up in 20 minutes. This next one is by the science fiction author Stephen Baxter. whose work I don't typically like all that much. He's industrious. He's done a lot of stuff, and a lot of it has been the kind of thing that I should like, but typically no. I don't know if that's me. It's probably me. But he wrote a sequel to War of the Worlds called The Massacre of Mankind that I love. This is so good. It is just so good. It's the Martians come back. That sums up the plot in one sentence. The Martians come back, and this time they're ready. This time they're ready for Earth's bacteria and viruses. They're ready for Earth's paltry technology. Lasts a fraction of a second. They come back, and this is that story, and it's amazingly good. I don't know how much you would really enjoy The Massacre of Mankind were you not really familiar with the War of the Worlds. But you should be really familiar with War of the Worlds, so you could correct that, couldn't you? The War of the Worlds will take you an afternoon to read. Then we have an old modern library. This should not be here. I have a bookcase right over my shoulder there of canonical classics. It needs to be bigger. Maybe this whole room needs to be that. But this will do. I found this in a little free library, and it is the most gorgeous version of this that I've ever seen. It's a little modern library collection of the poems of Longfellow, but with this lovely New England cover. People tromping their way through the snow. It snowed a little today, first time in 2023 here in Boston. No accumulation, but interesting to see. I wasn't sure that I would see it again this year. And Longfellow is, much like Van Wyck Brooks, he's a classic New England production number. I love him. I would love... I have this little thing, and I have the Penguin Selected Poems. And I know out there is a big annotated complete Longfellow that's a big fat thing. I've seen it, but I haven't seen it in a long time. I'd love to find that and make that my hardcover Longfellow, although I have Longfellow aplenty on my e-readers. A big annotated edition is something that won't be in an ebook form, and something I would go back to. I would really like a new big annotated Longfellow, maybe with illustrations. There are plenty of Longfellow illustrations. He was once the most popular poet in the world. There are plenty of Longfellow illustrations that I'm sure have either lapsed out of copyright or for which the copyright cannot be found that a publisher could use. And a lot of them are really nice. But then anyway, we'll finish up with another anthology. This was edited very lightly. We'll use air quotes here for that edited. This was edited by the great short story writer Frank O'Connor. And this is a Book of Ireland, just a little thing that has excerpts. This was a part of a series that this publisher did. This is Collins. They did it. It's part of a series. It's got full of black and white photos of castles and horses and cold beaches. There's Ireland in a nutshell. It's a lovely anthology. It's not in the right place. Neither of these are. These are small books. They're shorter books. Look at the size of this. The size difference there. And that offends. They ought not to be here, or they all ought to be this size on this shelf, and the larger ones ought to be somewhere else. It offends not only because it looks weird, but also because it prevents the top of the section from being effectively used. Stuff will have to balance on top of books. Whereas if it was all tall books or all short books, they'd be a uniform surface that you could then stack books on without having them tilt or slip or slide or whatever. I will figure it out. I will work out how to do that. As soon as I'm done with this bookcase, I will pause, remake this bookcase, and then move on. So there you go. That is installment number 1 of a 2023 library tour. I don't know how long I will keep up the nerve to do this. I'm hoping that I can get at least this whole little book room done. That would be great. But, a part of me is also hoping that I could do all of it, that I could do all of those 5,000 books. That would be great. To show every one of those to the camera would be invaluable for me down the line. I'm not sure how interesting it would be for you, but maybe. It's always fun to look at other people's books. Maybe that would be the case. But anyway, that is installment number 1, no matter how many there are. So I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.